Good afternoon and welcome everybody to this edition of the CMI 75th Anniversary Leading Lights interview series. I'm Francke, the Chief Executive, and I'm delighted to be joined today by CMI companion Jackie Stevenson. Jackie is the founder and global CEO of the Brooklyn Brothers, a very successful award-winning advertising agency, and she's also the immediate past president of WACL, Women in Advertising and Communications London, where she and I work together to reinstate gender pay gap reporting. So lovely to see you, Jackie. Welcome.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Great. Well, let's get started. So the first question, quite a big question. Tell me, what role do you think that values and ethics and culture play in being a good manager and leader in today's world? And what role do they play for you personally in your role?
I mean, it's no surprise that I'm going to say that they're hugely, hugely important. And I think that they are not just an attraction and a talent magnet for any company or organization, but they're also a business driver, because when you know who you are and who your values are, I think that really translates with anyone that you work with. But I think really importantly, I think what we've learned, particularly over the last few years, is how important it is to feel safe in an organization, to feel understood, to feel seen. And I think, people, not just, Gen Z and millennials, where lots have been written about, but everyone in an organization wants to feel that the job that they're doing is more purposeful than just going in and earning money, and they're looking for personal growth through the job. And this talent market where we're fighting for talent, it's so important. So being really clear about your values and who you are as an organization, how you show up throughout your organization, and how you show up externally is really, really important for both business and people. And I think the way that I try and do it and do it at the Brooklyn Brothers, clarity about our mission and what we're doing and why we're doing it is so important, and transparency in the way that we're doing it. Not everything always goes right, and things are changing so quickly. So being transparent is so important. Knowing who your business is really important too. And I think it's something that I've learned a lot actually in the last 12 months. As my business, we sold to IPG, a bigger organization who's done so much for our business and really helped accelerate our growth. But we're transitioning. We were a very entrepreneurial business that really recruited entrepreneurs. And now as we become more grown up and we move into a bigger organization, we need to recruit different types of people with different shapes, and understanding how the values of the business change as we change is really important. And I think the final thing is the importance of kindness in any values now. I think kindness in an organization and kindness in leadership is super important. It's something that, really should be at the heart of the way that any culture works going forward.
Yeah, no, great answer. And it's also really important that you said that you've noticed your own transition from being a more entrepreneurial business to being part of a more established network, but making that connection between, the importance of culture and purpose and attracting talent in what is a very tight labor market. So it's a great point. But still, there are lots of challenges that people face when they start their career, not least younger women as well. And tell us, what challenges do you think might still exist that were around when you started your career, and what did you do to overcome them?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I mean, there's many things, but there's two things I'd kind of like to focus on this question. I think the first is this whole aspect of covering who you really are. And I think I certainly, when I started my career, covered who I was at home and tried to present this very polished, very together, almost quite male orientated in the way that I was presenting myself at work, because I thought that's what I needed to do to succeed. And I think now, in terms of covering who you really are, I think it's so important to your health and your well-being that you really begin to show who you are, and you are trusting in your workplace to understand that. And I think work-life balance is one aspect of this. And I think being able to show who you are out of work as well as who you are in work is really, really important. And I've certainly, learned now that that being who I am and bringing who I am to work is really, really important. I think the other area that hopefully is coming in our favour now, and it touches on one of the things I said earlier, is female leadership and the traits that are traditionally seen as female. Those are leadership traits now that the world needs, and they're not exclusively owned by women, but they have been kind of, I think in the past, seen to be more attached to women as leaders. Empathy, back to kindness, back to understanding, listening, and I think that's something that as a leader now, I use less of, because I thought it was more important to be seen to be more ambitious, more driving, ones to speak first in a meeting. And I think now certainly, I'm learning that a lot of the traits that I have naturally in me are the ones that make me a better leader. So yeah, that's been really important for me.
That's a great recognition, and I can identify with that feeling that, I like you. In the beginning of my career, the feeling that you need to be an honorary man, right? Now don't talk about your family, don't talk about your interests outside of work. And I think that is really changing. And you're absolutely right about how leadership traits are changing as well. What do you think about, what's a new challenge that maybe wasn't around when you started your career that you think that people who are just embarking on their careers may face now, and any advice to them as to how they might deal with that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that the last 2 years has really brought about is how many challenges there are in the workplace, challenges that, as individuals we've personally experienced, and challenges that we're now learning about. If it's not our lived-in experience, but we're learning better about how other people with other experiences and other backgrounds are challenged. And I think for managers, particularly new managers, young managers coming into the any industry now, the expectation on managers is utterly huge to be able to know how to handle these situations, to be empathetic for many situations that we haven't, many of us haven't been in before. And I think it's really important now that managers realise and know that they're not going to be able to get everything right. And that's part of managing and understanding, and how to be empathetic in the way that you are working with people, to put your hands up and go, actually, our organisation didn't do that right, or I could have handled that personally better. Give me feedback, help me understand how I can be a better manager. That's a really, really important part of managing, because I see these huge expectations that teams have now on managers. And if you're a new and a young manager coming into that can be really daunting. And I think it's so important that we as managers and leaders in business who've been doing this longer help new managers understand that you're not going to get it right first time, and that actually this is a process of continual learning.
Yeah, no, you're right, and that it's okay to make mistakes, and you'll learn from that. I think that's a really important observation. Now, you talked earlier about how the organization you founded, Brooklyn Brothers, has evolved and changed from being an entrepreneurial startup to part of a larger established global group. How do institutions find the right balance, organizations or institutions, between continuity and that ever-present change that's only getting, as you said, faster and more abundant?
I think that, and I can only really speak with great depth of knowledge in my industry, which is the creative industries, the media industries, the things that really help organizations and companies drive growth. I think the answer in this really comes in resource and talent, and when you invest and when you enjoy returns. And I think that one of the things that I learned from the whole period of lockdown and that huge uncertainty that we went through is that it was so easy for us as organizations and businesses to retract and protect the margin by pulling back on people. And I think that was, in hindsight, any organization that did that too much really suffered, because they really struggled to continue with continuity, and they had no brilliant brains thinking about change and looking out at the front and going, right, where is change coming from and how are we going to prepare? So I think really being able to be clear in your business line and budget line on where you're investing in talent and people, and where you are understanding how your people best respond and where they're best placed. Because some people like being right out at the front of the ship and going, I can see a storm ahead, this is how we're going to plan. And other people want to be actually in the engine room and looking at how we're tackling the waves that are coming now. And I think making sure you've got the right resource in the right place and you've got the confidence to protect your budget to invest in talent is so important. Because I'm hugely interested in the growth economy and where growth is going to come from, because growth isn't going to be mass consumerism anymore. The planet can't afford that. And so growth is going to come from new and different areas where we're offering services at a deeper level, maybe how we're being able to help consumers buy less for more in a better way. And that's going to need a different type of structure in organizations, because it's not mass and more. And I think that the answer really lies in people and being able to bring people in, invest in people and use them in the right way.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about convincing people to buy less. I think you're right. That's going to become more of a trend. It was very interesting. I think I saw an ad for clothing that encouraged people to buy less of their clothing line because it was better for the planet. So it was like, oh, all right, well, that's kind of interesting. But you're right. You're saying, have some people focused on the future and have some people deal with the present and don't underinvest. And I think certainly the industries that have, we're all reading the headlines now about what's going on in the airports. They let so many people go, and now they can't hire people back fast enough and train them to, be there for their recovery. So it's a delicate balance, isn't it? But a very interesting one. Well, obviously, as a leader, I know you're an advocate for equal opportunities for women. Now, and indeed, a part of that too is it's not just women; it's also people from different ethnic backgrounds. What do you think we should be doing to accelerate progress in these areas? Because I think you and I agree it's still too slow.
Oh, completely. And I think, one of the biggest tools that we've got, and it's one of the ones that, we've worked on extensively together, and is the ability in an organization to implement flexible working for everyone. I think that flexible working allows work to be curated into people's lives and allows people to be able to do the things that they need to do to show up in the best way at work. It also hugely accelerates anyone's ability to be able to go up through the organization, so that if you are going up through an organization, it isn't about being on diktat with time, and that you are able to bring your best self and your best brain and thinking to work by being able to kind of curate the way that you work. And it's not easy, because, I mean, we went on this journey with WACL. We offered seminars, training, toolkits to be able to help people implement flexible working at work. And there are many challenges that kind of come up as you go through this. You know, how do you deal with childcare if you are working flexibly? You know, it was easier in the days just on childcare, where it was a 4-day week, because on your 5th day you didn't have to have childcare. How do you start as an organisation helping women and men to organise childcare? All sorts of things that we have to work through. But I genuinely believe that flexible working as a tool, and implementing that across the board in every organisation, is really going to help everyone be able to achieve their best potential, and be able to work up through senior levels. I think on ethnic representation, and particularly management and leadership, it's really, really tough, because it's not an easy thing to do if you just look immediately in your industry. And I think what we all have to do as leaders is we have to look in different places. We have to really look for the skill sets that we need, and not just assume that they're going to be readily packaged up in other organizations that look like us. And I think we need to go outside and find those leaders to bring in that talent. But we also need to listen. And I think, you know, we've been enormously lucky at IPG that we've had a huge amount of investment in us as people in training to really understand how to make a workplace attractive for everyone. And I think working on our workplaces so that actually they are beacons of opportunity for diverse talent is really, really important, really important.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I mean, it's great that at IPG you're equipping managers and leaders with the capability to do this. At CMI, we know through a lot of our research that you know, people say, of course, there's equal opportunity here, but then when you ask them to drill into the specifics, they're often kind of unaware, and a lot of that also is that they're unaware, or they don't feel confident dealing with it in their own spheres, in their own teams. And again, when we ask them why that is, it's because they're afraid to have the conversation. They're not sure how to approach it. And what advice would you give to somebody in terms of what kind of conversation would you have about, for example, ethnicity in the workplace, or how do we make managers and leaders feel more comfortable doing that?
I think the way that we've done it is through group training, and I think that there are some great training programs that don't cost a lot, that help you as a team move through and recognize some of these challenges and talk them through together as a team. Because I think it's incredibly lonely trying to do this as an individual manager. And I think training together, and really it's almost facilitation to have these conversations in the round, is really, really important, because nobody has all the answers. And everyone is at certain stages of their own journey, depending on what their lived in experiences, what their level of privilege is, and how many of these experiences they've been exposed to in the past. And being able to be vulnerable in a team and talk about the fact that you didn't even see something that was happening right in front of your nose, and that actually, how would you have handled that differently? How could you be helped, and how can you help others in the workplace call out some things that are happening that maybe one person sees and the other person doesn't, and you can work on it together. I think facilitation in group training is really, really important. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that I would say is keep listening and keep learning and keep an open mind. one of the things that we do as part of our training in Brooklyn Brothers is we work on projects together that use the skills that we have to try and make change in the world. And as a response to the situation, it's certainly in terms of what happened in America with racism in policing and George Floyd and all the things that we know are happening over here in the UK, and we're all working towards this. We did a project which was quite an edgy project called Dear White Parents. And we produced a film, a creative film, to help white parents understand that the privilege that they have, not to do with anything that they are doing personally, but just in the world through systems, is a lot more privileged than Black parents. And we tried to help them understand through a film how they could help educate their children as they went through their education, not to be racist right from the get-go, and not to accept some of these systemic racism systems that we've got in place that we don't even know about, to be able to call those out. That's tough conversations. That's tough conversations. And I think we as a team used that project to have these conversations, and it became a learning experience for all of us that was less personal because we were working on a project together. And I think doing that, to be able to work on projects together, to have those conversations is really, really important. And I think it's something, you know, that we found hugely important in our journey together as a business.
That's great. Is that film publicly available? Because if it is, well, if you send us the link,
it is.
We'll share it because it sounds fascinating. Sounds like a great project. So yeah, I would love to see that. So dear white parents, we'll look out for that, and we'll certainly share it with our CMI audience. So one of the things that we're grappling with, and I know you're also on our 75th anniversary commission, and we're looking at all the areas of where, you know, you have marginalized groups, clearly women and sexuality. There are still issues around women, LGBTQ. There are issues with disability, ethnicity, as we've touched on, socioeconomic background, class, right? And indeed age. All of these, you know, people that are one or more of these things can suffer discrimination at work, as we know from the data. Now, there are two schools of thought, and actually there's a continuum of it. Some people say, you know what, just do it. It's all about all of these characteristics. It's all about inclusion. Just do it all together. Other people say, well, actually, no, the experiences of each group are slightly different, and indeed individuals within groups. And to make the progress, you need to have a very focused project that sets individual goals and targets rather than, you know, all encompassing. Where are you on that continuum? What do you think is the best approach?
I genuinely think that we're all on a learning journey wherever we are, and I think it's very difficult to look from an organisational level at a one-size-fits-all. I think that there are so many different challenges with groups and individuals on all of these areas that people have to work through. I mean, one of the hardest areas at the moment is how the trans community are being treated, and how people feel about trans people. And I think, you know, you can't treat that in the same way as you would do ethnicity and race. And I think as an organisation, there has to be ability to be able to talk about these different challenges and the way that we're going to address them as an organisation in a training and facilitated conversation environment, because people have very different views in this and are on journeys in different ways. From a leadership perspective, though, it's really, really important to set out clearly what behaviours are unacceptable and not tolerated. And I think that from a leadership perspective has to be done at the top, and it has to be really clear in policy in the way that you lead and you set out your stall as a leader. And then I think managers take that on, and I think can be much more in the moment and with real humanity to be able to call out any behaviour and talk it through. And I think that's the kind of real safety net that managers, and a really, really important role that managers play, which is to be able to feel safe to call these things out. And often this happens without malice. It's done through inadvertently not thinking about a situation, or stress. You know, if you're in a stressful situation, you know, you revert to old behaviour. And I think managers have a huge role to play in being able to call that out and talk about it. And then in terms of kind of stakeholders, I think, you know, we are really clear on this. We're really, really clear on our policies. And, you know, we very much in one area where we're looking at hiring different talent to direct and produce and star in any of our film work, we subscribe to Free the Bid. So we're always making sure that we get equal representation on any bid that's put in terms of directorship talent or producing talent. And we expect our clients and anyone that works with us, our suppliers, to follow the same. And we have other policies in that. So I think being really clear on those policies and holding clients and suppliers to account at the same level is really important.
Mm-hmm. And tell us again the name of the organization that you, or the charter that you subscribe to that gives equal representation.
Free the Bid.
Okay, because again, that's an important example of how, you know, we can actually insist that it's like with balanced shortlist, we can insist and ask that of all that supply us. But you've talked a lot about calling it out, which I think is great, and it's something that we all need to learn to do, which can be difficult. Can you give us an example, maybe, of when you've done that in the past and you've seen it work?
Yes, I think one of the things, again, it's a WACL backed initiative, and it's through the work that we've done with Time 2, which really looks at sexual harassment at work at its worst, right through to behaviours that are just unacceptable to make women feel smaller at work than they are. And there's a whole gamut there, and obviously, you know, you get to a point where, you know, sexual harassment is unacceptable and should be prosecuted, but there are small microaggressions that are happening on a fairly regular basis. And I think that what we've done at Brooklyn Brothers is we've really invested. I mean, again, we've done the training, we've done it as men and women together. We talked about how women feel sometimes when certain things are said. If you talk across a woman, if you put your hand on her in a supportive way, but you're doing that in a way that could also feel like it's demeaning. And we've talked these things through. So as a team, we know what we're looking for. And so if we see that behavior in the workplace, just these microaggressions, it's really easy for us to be able to take somebody aside and go, did you realize that you made Georgia feel like this? I could see that. Gosh, and on off, it's like, no, I didn't realize that at all. It's just one to watch out for in the future. We've also been through diversity training, and hair is an enormous issue and source of enjoyment, and being able to be who you are and wear your hair in whichever way you want to is really, really important. And I think, you know, we've got a very supportive group of women at Brooklyn Brothers who will often go, oh my God, I love your hair, touch braids and the rest. It's like, well, that's not acceptable. It's seen as something that's supportive, but actually, you know, you are who you are. You don't want your hair touched. So just things like that, where you can call a behavior out, but do it in a supportive way, which is like, did you realize that you made someone feel like that? No, I didn't. You know, that's okay, but let's just make sure we work together in the future. So you know, it's a journey, but one that I think we all have to go on together.
Yeah, those are some really great examples, actually. Actually, the hair thing is a very real thing, isn't it? Right? And the impact when you do ask somebody, oh, I love your hair, can I touch it? And actually, that's not really, that can make people feel quite violated, right? So it's a really important example. Well, obviously, we're all aware that technology is evolving. It's enabling us to have this conversation remotely. It played a huge role in the pandemic. And the availability of data. We've touched on the ability to measure, for example, the gender pay gap. As data and technology continue to advance, do you think that how are there ways that you can see those capabilities being useful as we strive to become more representative and more equal?
I think it's hugely useful, and it's it's useful in two really important areas. That the first is to make sure that you invest in gathering that data, and I think as technology gets better, that should be easier and quicker, and give managers more feedback immediately. And I think you touched on gender pay gap, and it's something that's so important, because gender pay gap is so important to measure so you can do something about it. And if you're not measuring it, you don't see where the hidden barriers are in your organization to particularly women progressing through your organization, which contributes to the medium gap between the highest paid man and the highest paid woman, and the medium paid man and woman. And it's something that we work on with Brooklyn Brothers. And sometimes I think it can be a bit misunderstood, because at Brooklyn Brothers, we're sub 100 people. So if we hire one person, that can have a huge impact on our gender pay gap. We don't have to report, because we don't, in terms of legality, because we're too small. But we do, because we want to focus in on it and we want to measure it. And we've got mostly women in the organisation, but the men that we do have are middle or senior men. And that's a challenge for us. We need to make sure we've got more balance, middle and senior, and we need to hire more junior men. For some reason, our policy is bringing women into the organisation and not men, and we've got to change that. So if we didn't have that data, we wouldn't know that. And I think that that's so important with all the work we did, and together with our organisations, to ensure that companies that should report do report by law, so they can measure it and treasure it, and hopefully encourage other organisations to do that. And I think the other side is managing, when you've got big organisations, managing your talent and making sure that you've got the right talent in the right places and spaces, both in terms of their experience, their diversity, their background. And as we get more adept at using technology to manage workflow and build virtual teams to collaborate on projects together. I'm hugely impressed by McKinsey's tool. McKinsey just have a complete virtual workflow where they're using technology to build teams globally. And it's incredibly impressive, because you'd think it would be chaos. But actually the technology works, because people who want to work on projects, who are put up for projects based on their background, based on their skill set, based on their past experience, put their hands up, work together, and it's fluid. So I think there's an awful lot that we can do with technology, and making sure that we report it, use it, and keep investing in technology to help us in the future.
Yeah, that's a great example. And, that point you made about hiring more junior men, I can relate to that very well, because at CMI, we too are mostly women. But when we did our gender pay analysis, that's what we discovered is, actually there was a great imbalance in the bottom quartile. It was hugely, overwhelmingly female. And so what we needed is to hire, exactly as you said, more junior men, right? And not just revert to the what we had been doing, which is bringing in younger women into the organization, into entry-level roles, but not men. So and you don't know that. You're absolutely right. You do not know that unless you're measuring these things. And then, of course, the other point you've touched on is the progression, and that's what really, for many marginalized groups, is lacking. You might have them in the bottom quartile, but they're certainly not represented in the top quartile. And that's because they don't have the progression that they need. And again, without measuring that, you won't know that. And without having that data, you won't know that. So I think, we would certainly agree with your observation there. And increasingly, there are going to be tools like you mentioned at McKinsey. We've talked about a tool that pings hiring managers or managers when the algorithm detects that they're being perhaps biased in who they're promoting or who they're hiring.
I
And
love
again,
that. That's a great example. Great
it's
example.
great to have technology and tools to help us. So, okay, we've touched on COVID, our friend, some people would say, still very much present. But what have you learned in this marathon crisis and pandemic about your own leadership style? And what do you think we've learned collectively, perhaps as a society?
I think in my leadership style, I've really learnt to accept the whole person and use my empathy and kindness to be able to lean in and help someone be the best they can be at work. I think it's an overused example, but the fact that we could see into people's houses and their rooms and what they were dealing with was a very real and visual representation of their whole life. And I think that that's something that I have learned in leadership, that to be brilliant at work, you need to be able to be brilliant at home, and you need to be able to give people what they need in their life. And one of the things that's super important to me is dancing, ballroom dancing. And I find that I'm a competitive ballroom dancer. I train a lot. If I don't train and I don't get out there and exercise and have that mental stimulation, I'm not as good in work. So I've now really prioritized that in my working life, and I talk very openly about it and build it into my day. And I really expect my team and people that I work with to do the same. And I think that's something that's really changed in my leadership style, where you would almost like talk about that after hours. Now I talk about it as a really important part of what makes me at work. So I think that's kind of like changed my style. I think just in terms of that broader piece, I think management and leadership is so important now, because we live in a society and a world that's constantly changing. And that can be so destabilizing and so exhausting. And I think management and leadership needs to be there to have something to believe in, to give some safe structures and clarity about how to manage change. It's okay. If something changes, we've got this in place. This is where we're going. If it's going to change, I'm going to let you know. Having that safety and that ability to believe in something is really important. As a leader myself, leading my teams, but also as a bigger organization, looking up to my leaders and my CEO and looking at what he's talking about in terms of where we're going to be as a group. And that gives me comfort in constant change. He's got a plan, and I can buy into that. And I think our political leaders probably need to do a bit more of that. They are so short term, and they are so focused on, I've got it right, I'm right. And it's actually, well, here's the short term plan, and we've done our research, this is going to work. Here's what we think the long term plan is, and we've got people working on that, but that might change. That transparency and that ability to be able to do short and long and be honest about it is so important.
Yeah, that, and maybe following the rules that you set for everybody else.
Or if you're going to break them, say why you're going to break them and be honest about it. I mean, covering up. Oh dear.
I know, but you are, by the way, I've seen the pictures. I've never seen you perform, but I know you're a super accomplished ballroom dancer, and I think that's great. And I think that I love that you now say, and I'm open about that. I don't just save it for after work. I make it part of who I am at work, and I think that's a really good example that you feel able to do that, and that you recognize it's part of who you are, and it's important to you to be your best at work. So I think that's great. But I know that successful sponsorship, successful mentoring, they're two different things, can be very important to people's progress. What about, your views on that? Have you had successful sponsors, and do you sponsor people? And maybe you can share with us.
Yeah, I've had some brilliant mentors in my career, and they've really helped me tackle new situations. One of my mentors has managed and run very successfully PLC boards, and I'm about to enter into a new phase of my career where I'm going to be engaging much more with PLC boards and getting a PLC board to commit to my programs and what I want to do. And he's helped me enormously navigate that, to know some of the things to watch out for, what I should be doing in terms of making sure that I get heard at board level in a big PLC board. So, examples like that, brilliant. I've never been sponsored proactively in my career, and I think that's a shame. And I am very open to sponsoring individuals. I've done it in smaller parts of people's careers. I think we've been a real incubator at Brooklyn Brothers for female leadership talent, and we've brought them in and we've shaped and helped them get the tools that have given them the confidence to go on and take bigger roles, which I'm hugely proud about. Our alumni in our Brooklyn alumni outside in the industry is huge, and I've really helped those women in their next steps and sponsored them to get those roles wherever I can help. I can't always help, but I think that's really important. And I think part of that is also coaching, and I think this coaching ability to coach, to have a coach at work, whether that's a formal coach or an informal coach, is probably really at the heart of this for me, because there are so many different challenges and situations that can become overwhelming, and to be able to go outside your organization and share those and know that you're doing things in the right way and have the confidence to do that, or in a safe space be told, actually, maybe there's a different way of doing that. Maybe change your mindset on this and do it in a different way. That's been incredibly important. So yeah, I think it's very important. My mentors have been important. Coaching's been important, and I really, really support sponsorship and very willing to do that for the women that have been in my organisation and anyone else who needs it.
Yeah, and it is very gratifying when people go on and they become very successful, right? Maybe always, in many cases, if I look, some of the people I've sponsored have gone to far surpass me in their careers and the importance of their roles. But it's incredibly gratifying to see them succeed and know that you helped shape them at some point in their career and maybe help them to achieve something. And obviously, WACL does have a mentoring program. I'm doing it, the WACL mentoring program, and I had one of my mentee discussions. She was facing a situation. I had been exactly in that space 20 years ago, and so I think something that she felt very uncomfortable with. Obviously, she was quite a bit younger than me. I was able to say, no, you know what? I hear you. It's normal. It's okay. It happens, and share my experience with her. And I think that helped her a lot in this very difficult situation that she was going through. So it's important, as you say, that we do seek it out and offer it up.
Exactly. And thank you for giving the WACL a plug on that, and the talent mentoring. It's an amazing program, and we've got so many brilliant women in WACL who give brilliant advice for anyone on their leadership journey as they go up. So yeah, being able to just sit and talk to someone. I mean, like, you've helped me on situations. It's been amazing to be able to have those conversations. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah, no, it's a great program. Okay, we're gonna get to questions in just a minute, but first I have a couple of big questions, which is important. So, what does a better and fairer society look like for Jackie Stevenson?
Better and more gender equality. We need to get 50-50 through every business organization, political organization, and systemic organization.
Great. Well, that's a short and succinct answer. It is amazing. We are 51% of the world, and still, single digit in most leader, CEO or political leadership positions, right? So you're right. We're not there yet. And if we were there, going back to something you said at the beginning, and where we had those leadership qualities, that are often associated with women, like kindness and empathy and listening, the world would be a better place, and I bet we wouldn't be facing a war.
Well, it's so interesting you say that, because I genuinely believe that women are going to change the world, and I think it's going to be the women in Russia that are going to really rise up and stop this situation. And it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be quick, but I think it's going to be the women that are going to lead this. I mean, you listen to the mothers who are just shocked and appalled at what is going on with their leadership, and they can see and feel what's happening. And I really do believe that the next, when the history books are written, the next interesting chapters on politics are going to be female-led and female-driven from the population, not just the politicians.
Yeah, you're right. And before we take the questions, and that's an interesting thought, so watch this space, but what's the one piece of advice you might want to give to those who are joining us on this broadcast, and maybe to government?
I think it's really, I mean, I'm going to keep going on my gender equality point, and I think it's really, really important to really think about a balanced view where you are in any organisation, whether that's political or in business. And I think really keeping an eye on how you are curating and putting together a genuinely balanced team. Yes, on gender, but ethnicity, diversity, different perspectives. And, it might not always be popular, but I am a big fan of quotas. And I think, the Women's Equality Party have published, we could get to gender equality in the British Parliament, both in terms of MPs and the Lords, in 2 elections if we had quotas. At the moment, we've got 29% female MPs and 24% peers. If we had quotas that said the next 2 elections, 60% of the MPs had to be women and 75% of new peers had to be women, we would do that in 2 elections. Now that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Now, that's probably going to be incredibly unpopular, but we need balanced leadership. And I think we've shown that organic doesn't go quick enough. So quotas for me.
Okay, well, that's a great place to start taking some questions, and very interesting stat to know it would only take two elections instead of, I think the other answer is 69 years. So a lot more than 2 elections, which is at the current rate of progress. In Britain, it's much longer globally, of course. But anyway, thank you for that great examples there and great insights. Okay, questions. Our first question comes from Ben. I totally agree with you, Jackie, about the massive expectations on managers. As you say, being able to accept that we won't get everything right is important. But how do we help set those expectations with team members, some of whom do still feel we should get it right every time?
It's a brilliant question, really brilliant question. And I think there's 2 parts to this. I think the first is, at a leadership level at an organisation, you need to create a safe space for people to be able to feedback and talk. If they don't feel safe, then you're never going to be able to get to that position, and they're always going to be resentful of things happening and not talk to you. And that's going to come back and feel very uncomfortable as a manager, because you're going to get that in hidden behaviors, anxiety, anger, whereas actually it's being triggered by something completely different. But if you can create that safe space, if you spend time talking about what people are feeling, being honest about opinions and what's being said about the organisation, I think then you can get to that next level where you can work as a group and a team. And I think it's really important to build feedback time in to any team working together and give ownership of the performance of the team to the team. Mm-hmm. So if somebody comes back to you and says, well, I didn't feel listened to here, or you said that and didn't give me this, it's like, Great, that's brilliant feedback. Let's take that to our weekly forum. Let's share that. Let's work together on that. So as a team, we can make sure that doesn't happen again. And I think that team behavior is important, but it's not something you can jump straight to. You've got to create a safe space, and you've got to have build an organization that's comfortable with feedback, and feedback being a gift and moving forward, not just critique.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. It was so interesting. I was having the exact same conversation earlier today. So it's great to hear you making that exact same point. Feedback is a gift, and we need to be able to both give and receive it to create that safe space, right? And that means admitting that as managers we don't get it right, and bringing that to the team and saying that's okay, right? Because we're going to have a discussion about why that is. And being able to be, share when you feel unheard, just as you said. So, question from Anna. How do you think we can get some of the highest profile leaders and organizations to understand what flexible working really means? It still seems that in many high profile areas, this isn't understood, with politicians encouraging returns to the office and implying that 9-to-5 presenteeism is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a big challenge, and I think that the government speaks out of both sides of their mouth on this. If you speak to Liz Truss and what she's been doing with equality and gender equality, she's promoting flexible working at one end. If you then listen to some things that Boris says when he's supporting some of these big financial institutions, he's like, yeah, return to the office. So I think we have to take responsibility for this at a business level. And I think there's two immediate things that I can give in terms of advice. The first is, if you are in an organization and you feel that they are not taking flexible working seriously, get yourself to a position where you are on a committee, or set up a committee, or set up a group that talks about how you can implement flexible working and what that means through the organization. Go to the person that you trust in that organization at the highest level and suggest that you set up that group, and they should listen to you. And I think you need to call it out. And in my own organization, they talk a lot about grassroots level about flexible working, and they're really doing it at grassroots level. But as I mentioned, I'm kind of moving into a different role, and I got my contract, and my contract said 35 hours, 9-to-5, Monday to Friday. And I was like, guys, girls, this isn't really practicing what we preach, is it? Can I help with this? And they're like, you are so right. These contracts have come down through legal. Let's work on this. And it filled me with joy, because it was like, people are listening. And I think sometimes you blame organizations for things, but if you don't call it out and give them the opportunity to change, they can't. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, vote with your feet. Mm-hmm. If you're going into an organization and they're not talking about flexible working, don't go there. This is a talent market. Every industry is desperate for good talent. And if you're great talent and they want you and they are not offering flexible working, don't go there. And that's a tough one, but you have to do it, because only then organizations will understand, to get the best talent, they need to build flexible working right at the top.
Yeah, I think those are great examples. Somebody reached out to me and asked for advice. Should they go to an organization where they weren't keen on flexible working? And I said, no, right? Because, you can, the old, we'll talk about it after you've signed your contract. No, just make it, this is part of the deal. This is how I want to work. And similarly, we've had many conversations, as I'm sure you have, where you can attract better talent when you just say, look, of course you can work flexibly, not a problem. And that means the leaders as well, because, the leaders have to role model this, don't they? It can't be, it's fine for the grassroots, but I'm the CEO. I have to be in the office every day, all the time, 5 days a week. Again, that's setting a terrible example, isn't it?
Oh, awful. And I think, we all have a responsibility wherever we are in an organization to call it out, be kind, and offer to help, because often it's inadvertent, but vote with our feet.
Yeah, absolutely. Or do as you're doing in your organization, in your new role, which is be that change agent and just say, got to change the contract. Okay, our next question is from Lori. You both did amazing work to get the pay gap reporting reinstated. What are the next, thank you, Lori. What are the next big goals that you think should be focused on to make a real difference to inclusion? Well, Jackie, what do you think?
Oh, amazing question. And I think it's doing all the work that we're doing with women, with men. And I think, one of the biggest things that most people go through in their lives is they have a family. And that impinges on work in the old way of working. And I think what's happening now is that flexible working is becoming more prevalent, but women are still, and we know this through stats, doing the lion's share of work in the home, work around childcare. And I think that men probably don't feel comfy with that. How can we normalize the fact that men should have as long paternity leave as women maternity, shared childcare? I still feel with men, if they have to leave the office to do the school drop off or pick up, that they feel other people will look down on them or think that they're not taking their work seriously. No, we should be cheerleading this, going, this is a great thing that you're doing. Let's support that. I've had a couple of men that I've worked with who have been quite open about the fact that they're single parents and that's what they need to do. And they bring a different perspective into work. And that's a brilliant thing. And we should support that. So I think the answer really is doing all the great work that we're doing to help women better balance their lives and be able to curate their lives in the way that they want to, particularly around families. We need to be doing for men. And I think really supporting these leadership traits across all leaders that have traditionally been seen as female is really important. Helping men be able to talk about what they want and do in childcare and not cover that up is really important. To be able to work for genuine equality together as a team rather than it being a women's issue or a man's issue.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And we know from our research at CMI that so many men really enjoyed seeing more of their children, cooking meals with their children, being at home more, helping their partner do things around the house. And I think that's, opened their eyes as well to say, I don't want to have to be the so-called alpha male all the time. It's not who I am. I want to have I want to bring more of myself, not only in the office, but also at home, and to have that be okay. And I think that's a really important point, to not lean into that stereotype. And unfortunately, back to our conversation earlier, there are some leaders of some areas in government and in some of the larger organizations that are not, they're not walking that talk. They're still reinforcing that stereotype of,
Absolutely.
And that's harmful. That's what we've got to stop, as you say. Okay, here's a great question from Agnetha. What's your biggest mistake and what did you learn from it?
Biggest mistake, caring too much about what other people thought about me. Mm-hmm. I think you can never, ever please everyone. And, we're all work in progress. We can all learn from feedback. We must all take feedback on board about the way that we're making people feel. And that's important. But if you take that criticism or the gossip that's been passed on to somebody, and you let that undermine your own confidence or make you second guess your decision making, then that's really, really damaging. And I think that as soon as you can free yourself from really caring about what other people think about you, it's enormously freeing in your life, not just your work life, because you're master of your own ship. You can decide to do things in whichever way you want to. And I think Anne and I have talked about this a lot. WACL, when I took the WACL presidency, have been led in lots of different ways, and I had a very interesting challenge as I had to lead WACL through COVID and 2 lockdowns. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't really have a belief in what I thought WACL should do and where we should go, and bring myself to the role and surround myself with cheerleaders who were going to support me, tell me when I was going too far, tell me when I could rein back, but not undermine me. And I think that's so important. Just really have that freedom to be free of really caring about what other people think about you, and be the master of your own ship.
Yeah, that is excellent advice, and I know that will resonate. Now, our last question today is from Earl, who says, whilst there's still a lot of progress to be made, what do you feel is the most important advancement that's been made in inclusion in the last decade?
I think recognizing it and talking about it, and I think that it's still a concept that needs to be unpacked. But owning and understanding privilege is really important, because I think where we were a decade ago is we hadn't even seen privilege. We didn't even know what that meant. Maybe 5 years ago, privilege became something that felt quite personal. I don't use my privilege, it's all about me. I think where we are now is we all understand, to a greater or lesser extent, no matter what background we have, what gender, what sexuality, we've all got an element of privilege that has been put into us systemically. And we have to understand that and own that and accept that. And I think that's, for me, is one of the biggest advancements that we've made, to really begin to understand that and move as a society to help bring everyone up to that level.
Well, that's a great example, and do send us that link to the project that you worked on, Dear White Parents, which I know addresses that issue, and we'll share it with the CMI community. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us, inspiring as ever. Good luck with your new role. I know you'll excel, and thank you for all that you do on this topic. And for those of you listening, if you've enjoyed this broadcast and you're not a member of the CMI community, please consider joining us. You can find out how to do that in the chat. Thanks.
Oh, thanks so much, Anne. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.